international and local preservation and practices on globally important agricultural heritage systems. Welcome to SCoT, Satellite Volume 11. We are with you today with a special issue about agricultural heritage. As you can guess from the title, hello again, and sorry for the technical issue that is solved. Yes, we are going to have a focus talk on heritage. You might have heard about cultural heritage, but we are going a bit different today and talk about a new heritage studies, or something that Professor Parviz Kuhafkan has called it forgotten heritage. In this volume of SCoT, we focus on agriculture heritage. In the beginning, I would like to ask the lead curator of SCoT webinars, Professor Jafar Jafari, to have the opening remarks. Professor Jafari, floor is yours. You are muted, Professor Jafari.
Yes, I'm okay now. Thank you. Good morning at my end. It's past 2 a.m. here. Welcome to the webinar series. It's a pleasure for me to be with you, and wherever you are. What is relevant to all of us, we are here because we appreciate tourism, we understand tourism, and we would like to use the best aspects of tourism to regenerate business in many communities that used to depend on tourism, or communities that are discovering tourism because their other aspects of their lives are changing. Farm tourism, rural tourism is one of those instances. As I mentioned to my colleagues earlier, and I'm sorry I'm going to repeat myself to my colleagues, but for the audience, this is a webinar series that is not dealing with over-tourism, but it's dealing with under-tourism. Over-tourism belongs to large destinations, to popular destinations, and they have been in the business and successful because the government is with them, the industry is with them, the technology is with them, everything is with them. They know how to do things. But when the coronavirus took over, the communities that were really suffering more than anybody else were small communities. And that's why we gave birth to the SCoT webinar series, Small Community Tourism Development. We often deal with under-tourism destinations, and we, in contrast to what we had before coronavirus, which was over-tourism, measuring things in thousands and millions, we now concentrate on whether the destinations have certain capacity to accommodate tourism. So we use capacity, under capacity, over capacity in order to deal with the volume of tourism. By the way, Dr. Afadari, I'm not here to contribute to the discussion. I'm here to learn from the perspectives of the colleagues who have their own points of view. I'm very pleased, particularly to hear that we are talking about forgotten heritage. Heritage is a word that sits quite well with me. I am a cultural anthropologist, and culture and heritage are in more or less the same thing, depending on how we use them. So I'm here as a student as well to learn from your insights, and I would be joining you at the end of the presentation to sum it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jafari. I would like to continue the webinar with introducing our keynote speaker, Professor Parviz Kuhafkan. He is the founder and president of the World Agricultural Heritage Foundation and the UN Partnership Initiative on Conservation and Adaptive Management of Globally Important Agricultural Heritage System, so-called GIAHS. GIAHS is a program at UNFAO that was initiated about 20 years ago, and Professor Kuhafkan is the person who initiated and brought the idea. So far, we have many countries who are members of globally important agricultural heritage, and this initiative is going to bring light to heritage studies. And this webinar is going to bring a question to our mind that what is the first, culture or agriculture? And I hope we will find the answer by the end of this. And the important point is why we need to rethink about culture and agriculture together. I don't take more time, and I would like to ask Parviz to enlighten us with his keynote speak. Professor Kuhafkan, floor is yours. You are muted, Parviz.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Kazem. I have known Kazem and worked with him for the last 20 years. He was one of the members of scientific committee of the Globally Important Agricultural Heritage System. He chose today, 11th of March, which is my birthday. I am now 71-year-old. And I'm sitting, of course, behind my computer at home. Of course, these days with COVID, we are all at home, and especially it's a springtime here in Rome, and I would have loved to travel around, which I was doing in the past, but nevertheless, the situation is not really that great. Now, I would like to share with you my PowerPoint presentation and essentially to go through some slides that I've prepared. But before that, I wanted to thank Kazem and all the colleagues from Japan. Many of you I know very well because I have been working with them, with Japan, at least for the last 10 years. And thanks also to Asia Pacific University and of course SCoT that they have organized this. I am sharing my PowerPoint presentation, which I would speak about perspective on globally important agricultural heritage, to look into sustainable food system, rural revitalization, sustainable tourism, and resources management. And I'm representing a World Agricultural Heritage Foundation or Forum, which is an NGO based in Rome, but we are working at international level. Do you see my my PowerPoint? Everything okay? Okay, now, first, the headline of my presentation, I'm going to talk about very quickly sustainable food system and globally important agriculture heritage history, then why agriculture heritage system and the origin of GIAHS, sustainable development goals and current status of GIAHS around the world, World Agriculture Heritage Foundation, I will give a little bit of description what we are doing, and way forward, integration of tourism, food heritage, labeling of products, use and social development in an era of innovation. Starting with the food system problems, they are really big problems. We have over 7 billion people around the world, a little more. More than half of them live in the cities. Nearly 1 billion people have too little to eat. These are FAO's statistic about hunger in the world. We have 1.6 billion people who eat too much, unfortunately, according to World Health Organization. And we are wasting about 30% of our food, whether it is on the farm, whether it is in the supermarket, whether it is in our refrigerators. And this is a little bit of a schematic picture of what is happening to the world. I chose more of Asian countries, but also US and UK, comparing what is happening. And unfortunately, the obesity is a very, very big problem in many, many countries around the world. And of course, it has consequences for health, whether it is diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to get into details, but nutrition and health problem is a problem related to our food. Now, we have an urgent need to do something about our food system. And this was the subject of the summit last year, which was organized by United Nations, but also FAO. They concluded that our food system must be more human and in harmony with nature, biologically and culturally diverse. It should be a small scale, family operated and economically viable for smallholders, small farmers, socially just and participatory in decision making, because now most of decision making is done by big companies. Local production with more direct farmers to consumers link, that is very, very important. And it should be community-based, recognizing the rights of indigenous people and the farmers, and particularly women, who are still in most of the part of the world, are the basic of agricultural systems. In 2002, after a meeting that we had in Maastricht on multifunctional agriculture, which we didn't succeed really to integrate the idea of multifunctionality, I had to put the idea of multifunctionality of agriculture in a new sort of suit. And I suggested, as the task manager of Agenda 21 in FAO, I had several chapters of Agenda 21, guiding it. And during World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg in South Africa, I conceptualized the globally important agriculture heritage system concept, and then launched the international UN partnership initiative on GIAHS with the support of UN Commission on Sustainable Development. Actually, you can find it on their website. The GEF, Global Environmental Facility, and in collaboration with UNESCO, UNEP, CBD, UNCCD, UNDP, IFAD, IUCN, and many other partners. So we were really a good, big partnership together. What we defined the GIAHS is a remarkable land use system and landscapes which are rich in biological diversity, evolving from the ingenious and dynamic adaptation of a community to its environment and the need and aspiration for sustainable development. This was the definition we adopted in FAO in 2002. And of course, it's a very comprehensive definition based on sustainable livelihood which is also a very important discipline which has been ongoing for the last 30 years. This includes agriculture, forestry, fishery, and livestock system. It's not only agriculture. Our agriculture is more holistic than what it is often looked into. So it does cover also fisheries system and livestock system. They result from co-adaptation and co-evolution of plants, animals, humans, and related landscapes under a specific environment. You have probably heard about agroecology. Agroecology is a science which is related to ecological situation of every area. And human being, at least in the beginning of their civilization, they adapted to their environment. These systems are managed through adapted social, technical, cultural practices, and also institutions, including traditional institutions. They are a family farming often and a smallholder system providing food and livelihood security, economics, social and cultural benefits, and ecosystem services at local, national, and global level. These were the part of the discussions we had in our expert meetings, often connecting local and global. They are important, of course, at local level because they are the basis of food security of local people, but also important at national and global level, and they are unfortunately under threat. Globally important agriculture heritage system is supposed to bring together ecosystem diversity, biological diversity, socioeconomic diversity, cultural diversity, culinary diversity, curative diversity. These are the words which we have worked on. These are the sort of areas we have worked on many, many years in many, many GIAHS, and it is extremely important to put on the record that the diversity, from my point of view, from the point of view of many scientists, is the basis for sustainability. So more diverse system we have, more resilient is the system, and more sustainability we have. My specific idea was bringing culture back to agriculture. I am a son of a farmer myself, and I remember as a child in Iran how many interesting events and cooperation we had in our families and in our communities. So the idea is bringing culture back into agriculture, because modern agriculture is unfortunately very, very industrial. But also bring together global to local, local to global. How could we really show this very richness of local farming, local societies, local women who are keeping seeds, preserving the future of their sustainability. This agricultural system, which one example, you can see it from China, of course, are under threat. The reason is industrialization of agriculture and neglect of family farming and diversified farming system, inappropriate policies, legal frameworks, and incentive frameworks, low community involvement in decision-making, population pressure, and cultural changes. These are some of the very, very important areas, but there are many, many others, and you can certainly research on that, particularly in some of my research. Well, first, GIAHS, one of the first GIAHS that we mentioned, also thanks to Professor Nakamura, was GIAHS Satoyama in Japan. This is a very interesting system which has been cherished by Japanese, and in spite of the old generation of Japanese, there is still family farming and local farming very, very much alive, at least for their community. And that was one of them that we have chosen. The other one is Ifugao rice terraces, which is still very, very traditional, very indigenous, and food and other things. So it is very important. We have also chosen. There are many others. There are oases in Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria. There are rice terraces in Indonesia, floating gardens in Bangladesh, which was recently nominated as GIAHS, the saffron system. Of course, it's not the only one in Iran, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. So that was very important to look into. And in the beginning, we identified some 200 systems from which we actually established the baseline for GIAHS. And we created the Gis Selection Criteria, which is food and livelihood security, unique biodiversity and genetic resources of global significance, indigenous and local knowledge of individuals and communities, cultural diversity of agriculture, including products and service diversity, landscape diversity, and aesthetic values, which is directly related to the theme of tourism that we are going to talk about. We set up a strategic objective for GIAHS. We thought that at global level, we should identify, select, and recognize GIAHS and their communities through FAO's nomination, which is still ongoing, a very big program in FAO. At national level, building capacity in policy, regulatory, and incentive mechanism to safeguard this outstanding system and use them as sustainability benchmark system, as I said before. At local level, to empower local communities and giving them technical assistance, promoting traditional knowledge and enhancing viability of this system through economic investment in incentives. For example, food and product labeling, payment for environmental services, agrotourism, etc. Of course, empowerment of women in all the aspects of agriculture, especially in traditional agriculture system like in Andes in Latin America, Peru, and Chile and others, in Japan, in China, in many, many areas we have worked on that. GIAHS are living systems. They evolve. Of course, they adopt technologies, they adopt different way of cultivation, etc. But what is important is they should be in harmony with their environment. We should not plant something which is not really belong to that ecology. So these are some of the issues. And of course, GIAHS, because they are dynamic, they are not like UNESCO's World Heritage, because those are museums. GIAHS is not museum. So we should really make a difference between what is agricultural heritage and how it evolves, and of course, World Heritage Site or something which is similar to that. Of course, both of them are complementary, and but we should distinguish the difference. There is presently 60 GIAHS sites recognized by FAO in 22 countries, as you could see, mostly in Asia. There are many others to come. So we are waiting for, there is a waiting list for many, many new GIAHS, particularly from Europe, Latin America. This is one of the meetings that we organized in Chile, essentially granting the recognition of GIAHS to the farmers or young farmers in different countries. It was very, very sort of interesting to see these young farmers looking back and looking into their systems. And of course, as you see, that's the logo, the old logo of GIAHS when we had it in the past. These are some of the members of GIAHS community, which we were visiting both rice fish system in China, but also some cultural ceremonies in China, which is quite interesting, particularly from tourist perspective. Food labeling is another very important area of bringing back sort of traditional agriculture and agricultural heritage systems. And this is, for example, in China. The native potatoes, for example, in Peru, which are more than 300 potato varieties, which we actually revitalized some of them. And now you can see in many, many markets that the potatoes, which at the time, nobody knew them in Europe, but now I can buy it in Carrefour in my supermarket. There's also the products from North Africa, Oasis system, GAFSA in Tunisia, and of course, a rice fish system and others. Interestingly, Japan, because we are our host is in Japan, a case of Noto region. 3 years ago, one of the governors presented the impact of the GIAHS on Noto, and they said the number of new farmers increased by 71% after designation of GIAHS. The number of immigrants from other prefectures increased by 133, and he showed us some of the graphs. This means that really by revitalizing our agriculture, agriculture heritage, actually the young generation would like to go back and invest on their heritage. So that is very, very important and very pleasing. So few words about what we are doing. It's, as I said, the World Agriculture Heritage Foundation was after my retirement from FAO to assist globally, nationally, and now even family agricultural heritage system. Nationally important agricultural heritage system was proposed by China, and they have many of them, and many other countries are following. Not necessarily we need to be all globally important, but also could be nationally important. We give them technical and policy assistance, education and training, particularly to young generation, advocacy and fundraising for agricultural heritage system, and empowerment of capacity development and of GIAHS and NIAS communities. We recently also started working on food labeling of agricultural heritage system. We have a Shanghai case. Now we are having a case in Tunisia, also in Philippines, but there are many, many other areas of work that needs enormous capacity building. One other concept which is very important is food heritage. Actually, Mediterranean food diet now is becoming very, very important. There's a lot of funding coming from European Union to, actually, I am a member of the organization committee, and it is very, very important. Food heritage, connecting it with revitalization of tourism in many, many small areas. I'm sure Professor Vapadari has been working on that, and obviously it's very important to keep our food diversity through our food heritage. So one other area is dynamic conservation, which mentioned by Kazem, is how to convert goods and services of globally important agricultural heritage into marketable income and better livelihood. So one instrument we created recently, 2 years ago, is called Ag Legacy. You could go to our website and to know about this application, which allows the farmers not only limit his farm, but also take photos, take videos, describe what he has, not only what he has as asset, but also as problems, or communicate with our scientific group in order to resolve any problems. It is a very interesting sort of tool which allows the consumer and sort of producer to be connected, in addition to, of course, scientific advisory that we will give to these people. So to conclude, GIAHS represent revitalization of rural communities, the celebration of achievements of our ancestors, a guide to achieve sustainable food, nutrition, and livelihood security, helps to make young generation aware of glory of the past agricultural innovation and inspire them to make their own contribution to our agricultural legacy. Above all, GIAHS recognized and promotes the rights of the farmers and rural communities to their resources. For example, I am a member of International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources on access to genetic resources and farmers' right on their genetic resources. Also, GIAHS serves as flagship of rural revitalization strategy designed to enhance quality of well-being and equitable sharing of benefit driven from ecosystem. This is my book with Miguel Altieri, who is the founder of agroecology. We worked together for the last 25 years. And if you want more information about GIAHS, more examples of GIAHS, more dimensions of GIAHS, you could certainly write to me. I would be happy to offer you a book. It's also available on the internet as PDF. Thank you very much. This is a wonderful picture of Italy, which is actually a heritage for future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Parviz, for your very informative presentation. I would like to congratulate this coincidence that today is Parviz's birthday. Happy birthday to you, Parviz. And
thank you.
Happy initiative that you have started. I can see how GIAHS has been bringing changes. I've been working with GIAHS from its birth in Japan, from Noto Peninsula, that Professor Nakamura is going to explain how Japanese Satoyama and Satoumi was incorporated to Agriculture Heritage Initiative. And we were able, or we have been able to introduce the traditional Japanese agriculture landscape to the world and to collaborate with. So today we have a lot of things to learn. We have examples of biodiversity, culture, people, the life, and the famous sentence that I borrowed from Parviz always, that GIAHS is about the future. It's not all about the past. And GIAHS is a living system. All GIAHS beauty is that it is a system. And the people who are living in the system are part, or let's say, a very important part of the system. We cannot take people out and put their system in a museum to conserve it. We have to live with people and let them utilize the system and learn from the conservation and sustainability practices that people have been practicing and conserving the site. And now we have different presentation, and you will learn how a Japanese GIAHS collaborated with other GIAHS, or how agri-heritage in Japan in collaboration with agri-heritage in the Philippines, for instance, has been practicing. The second presenter is Professor Koji Nakamura. Nakamura sensei was the vice president in Kanazawa University, and he has been working with JICA for twinning program of GIAHS between Ifugao rice terraces of the Philippines and Japanese Noto Peninsula, Satoyama and Satoumi system in Japan. And he's going to share with us about his experiences with GIAHS. Professor Nakamura, the floor is yours.
はい、
中村先生、お願いします。
はい、それでは、画面の共有したいと思います。共有されてますか、風間さん。
はい。
それでは。
Yes, it's your desktop, 先生。Please open your file.
Okay. あ、今見ました。それでは、10分間しかないので、ちょっとお急ぎで喋りたいと思います。今日は、
先生、can you put your presentation in the presentation mode? It's now in your mode.
あ、そうですか。ちょっと待ってください。あれ？あ、そうか。これですね。じゃあ、こうすればいいかな。これでいいですか？これでいけてますか
？Is the same.
same？ あれおかしい。
上のディスプレイの入れ替えって押してみたらどうでしょうか。
どれですかね。
上の、もっと左の。左、その辺です。あれ先生見えてないんでしょうか。
あれかな。
先生、ここです。そう、ここです。
ファイル。
はい、こっち。
これですか、共有。
はい、一回やってみる。
これでいけないかな。これでいけるかな。ちょっと待ってください。共有。あれ、うまくいかない。
OK。
これで大丈夫ですか。それでは始めたいと思います。今日は、トゥイニング・オブ・ジアスと言いましてですね、能登半島のジアス、それから佐渡、この2つは日本ですね。それと、イフガを入れたですね、3つの、ジアスの、連携活動っていう。今日は時間がないので、能登と、イフガの話を中心にしたいと思います。あれ、進まない。ちょっとそうですね。それで、私は、金沢大学名誉教授の中村です。もともとは、エコロジーの専門家ですが、最近は、里山とか里海とかですね、日本の、重要な、ジアスにとって重要な里山とか里海について、先ほどパルビさんがちょっと触れてくれたんですが、それについて、その仕事をしてきました。特に、この下にありますが、いろいろな人材育成のですね、プロジェクトをやってきました。ちょっと早く進まない、遅いですね。押してるんですけどね。動きました。それで、日本ではですね、農業のシステムとして里山というのはですね、非常に重要です。それから、沿岸地帯の、生産する、システムとして里海、が重要です。なかなか進まない。ちょっと待ってください。押してるんですけど、次行かないんで。それで私たちは、国連大学と一緒になってですね、里山、それから里海の、日本の里山、里海のアセスメントですね、里山評価っていうのを、2005年から2010年までやって、日本の里山の現状とですね、問題点、これからのシナリオを調べてきました。こっちであれば。それでですね、里山という言葉は日本語なもんですから、もっと一般的な言葉にするように、ソシオエコロジカルプロダクションランドスケープというですね、そういう言葉を作りました。それで、能登半島と佐渡のジアスについて説明したいと思います。これは能登半島ですね。日本のこれ本州でして、それで佐渡は、能登半島はここにあって、100キロ離れた島に佐渡があります。それでこの2つの能登と佐渡が世界農業遺産に2011年に北京で国際会議があったときに認定されました。それでこれは能登半島の世界農業遺産のいろんな要素をですね、まとめたものです。生物多様性がありますし、それからいろんな伝統的な祭りがありますしですね、それから沿岸地帯では塩を作って製塩をしています。それから農業もいろいろあります。それでこれは佐渡の世界農業遺産の様子ですが、ちょっと飛ばします。それで一番大きな問題、2つの日本の農業遺産は大変素晴らしいんですが、大きな問題があります。それはどんどん人口が減っていることですね。それから人口のでは高齢化が進んでいてですね、その世界農業遺産のある能登と佐渡にはですね、若者がすごく少なくなってしまっているということです。それで人口が減りますと、農業ができなくなってきてですね、放棄された水田とか畑が出てきますし、それから、人工林を作ってもですね、管理ができなくなったり、最近はですね、クマですね、ブラックベアが人里に現れたり、イノシシが農作物を害するようなことが起こっても、それをうまくですね、コントロールできなくなって、世界農業遺産は素晴らしいんですが、農業はですね、そう簡単に動かなくなっています。それから同時に人口が減りますと、集落の伝統的な祭りですね、文化、祭りとか、儀礼ですね、 世界文化遺産に認定されているような伝統的な儀式がですね、次の世代につなげなくなっていっています。ちょっとこういうことが大きな問題が起こっています。そこで私たちは金沢大学では、金沢はここにあるんですが、能登半島の先端にですね、子供がいなくなった小学校を使って、人材育成プログラムを2007年に始めました。能登里山マイスタートレーニングプログラムというプログラムですが、初めは2年コースでですね、やりまして、私が代表者になって、若手のポスドクを5人、ここに常駐してもらってですね、私は金沢からここへ通いながらですね、それで、いろいろなメンターを雇ってですね、やっています。それで幸いですね、今年で16年目になりますが、毎年ずっとこの里山マイスターをやってましてですね、続けております。それでこれまで217人の卒業生が終了しています。それで実は明日、それの今年の修了式が行われます。たくさんの若者がですね、能登に集まってきて、地元出身の若者も含めてですね、いろんな形で活動が進んでいます。それで、生物多様性、どういうマイスターを養成しているかといいますと、生物多様性をですね、大事にしたり、エコシステムサービスをですね、重視する。それから、環境に優しい農業、林業、それから、水産業をですね、進めたり、食料の安全性とかですね、それで、エコツーリズム、それから都市と農村の交流事業とかですね、そういうことをやりながら、地域を再活性化していくというですね、それで、伝統的な文化も受け継いでいく。しかし同時にGIAHSですから、新しい技術も使っていくということになります。それで時間がありませんから、代表的な、マイスターの修了生についてですね、紹介します。この人は能登の出身の若者で、伝統的な技法を使って炭焼きをしています。しかし、都市の住民を能登に招いてですね、炭焼きのための、植林をしています。それから、この人は東京から来た人で、アメリカにも長く住んでたんですが、デザイナーとしてですね、こういう能登の真ん中に住んでですね、デザイナーの仕事をすると同時に、地元の皆さんと一緒になって、地元の植物を調べたりですね、環境教育をしています。それから、地元の若者だけでなしに、先ほどの方のようにですね、大都会からたくさんの若者がですね、現れています。これちょっと古いデータですけれども、今ではですね、受講生のうちの4分の1ぐらいが、大都会から来た若者によって、占められています。それで、その定着率はですね、非常に高くてですね、ちょっと古いデータですが、91% が大都会から来て能登に定着しています。そのように、能登の里山マイスターは、もう16年目なんですが、ますます活発に活動しています。それで新しい修了生を生み出しています。それで私たちは同時にですね、フィリピンのイフガオ棚田の世界農業遺産とも連携しています。それは、トゥイニング・オブ・ジアスというふうにですね、ジアスの連携ということで、日本とフィリピンの連携です。それで、イフガオ里山マイスタートレーニングプログラムというのをですね、イフガオで始めました。イフガオはこれフィリピンのルソン島ですが、北部の方の山岳地帯にある素晴らしい棚田が今もたくさんあるところです。しかし、ここでもですね、これは昔の棚田の風景で、最近のこれは棚田の風景でですね、使われなくなった棚田が現れてきます。それからですね、これは非常に有名な大きな棚田だったんですが、1920年にはこんなにすごかったんですが、最近はですね、全部がもう放棄されてしまってですね、イフガオ棚田の3割ぐらいがですね、いろんな問題が起こっているというふうに言われております。そこで私たちは JICA から資金をもらってですね、イフガオ棚田で能登の里山マイスターのようなシステムをですね、立ち上げました。2014年のことです。こういうふうなですね、現地でセレモニーをしてですね、始めました。それで今までずっとこのプログラムはですね、能登とイフガオがですね、交流しながら、それでイフガオでも活発にですね、このマイスタープログラムが続いています。それですでにですね、 110人ぐらいの修了生が出ています。1年コースでやっています。それで、初めの6年間ですね、フェーズ1は3年間、これは能登のシステムをですね、少し変えながら、イフガオに適用した。それからその後ですね、能登との交流を本格的にやりながらですね、さらに3年間、フェーズ2をやりました。それでコロナが始まったわけですけれども、今現在ですね、2021年、1年からフェーズ3を今進行中です。これは JICA のプロジェクト終わりましたので、イフガオの人たちが自分の予算を使ってですね、自分たちの組織で地元の自治体と大学が一緒になってですね、さらに今、フェーズ3をですね、続けているところです。修了生たちにはですね、こういう地元の棚田の農家ですね、それから棚田のお米を使ったですね、伝統米を使ったワインを作る方とかですね、伝統的な織物をする人。で、この方は自分で民宿もやっているわけですね。それから地元の町長をですね、保全活動して、これを観光に結びつけようとする若者とかですね、有機農業をするとかですね、まあそういう多様な人材が集まっています。これは能登と一緒でしてですね、能登半島と伊風川のですね、特別のシステムはですね、大学とか地元の自治体と一緒に活動している。それから多様なですね、受講生、それから多様なメンター、多様な関係者が集まっていることですね。それで、GIAHS とかですね、世界農業遺産、それから、SDGs とかですね、そういう、国際的なプラットフォームと関係づけてやっていますし、フェイス2フェイスのメンタリングというですね、非常にインテンシブなトレーニングシステムを使っているということがあります。伊風川にはすでにですね、こういう素晴らしいGIAHSセンターができて、ここを拠点に活動しているわけです。それで、伊風川から、JICA のプロジェクトの時にはですね、毎年20人ずつぐらいですね、日本へ、研修にですね、来ています。それから同時に、最近3年間ほどですね、能登の修了生たちが、伊風川を訪問する。そういうふうに、相互に訪問し合ってですね、連携活動が強化されています。いくつか写真をします。これは伊風川から、金沢に来た時の写真ですね。それから能登にある棚田、まあ、伊風川に比べたら小さなものですが、ここを訪問している。それから能登の農業を見学したりですね。能登では輪島類なんかのですね、工芸品が非常に盛んで、伊風川も木彫りが盛んなんですね。ですからそこで見たりですね。それから能登のマイスターの能登学者っていうですね、建物の中で伊風川と能登の受講生たち、それからメンターたちが交流したりですね。これは能登から伊風川に行った修了生たちのグループの写真です。それで、あとですね、少しディスカッションといいますか、問題点についてお話したいと思います。それで、これは日本の人口の出生率の変化、それから人口構成ですね。日本は先ほど初めに言いましたように、大変厳しいですね、人口減少と高齢化に面しています。それでどういうふうにこれから世界農業遺産を使ってですね、活性していくかということです。それで、これは世界の出生率ですね。日本は今 1.42 です。これをなんとか上げようとしてもなかなか上がらないんですね。それから、韓国はですね、日本よりも低くて 1.2、最近 0.8 だっていう説もあります。それから台湾は 1.0 だと。まあ今日は台湾とつながってますから、こんな話も聞きたいと思います。それから中国もですね、もう 1.56 になっています。ですから、世界が共通した課題でですね、GIAHSを使って活性化するということが課題になります。フィリピンはまだ幸いですね、2.98 という高い出生率ですが、しかし、棚田をですね、将来に向かってつないでいく若者の数がそんなにいないわけです。ですから、棚田がですね、維持できなくなっているという大きな問題が起こっています。それから、世界農業遺産、それからユネスコ世界遺産ですね、文化遺産、自然遺産、そういうのに認定されても大事なことは、認定が終わりじゃなくて、これが始まりですね。ですから、モニタリングをしながらですね、GIAHSを利用している農民、それからいろんな関係者がですね、モニタリングをしていく。それからアクションプランをですね、モニタリングをして評価しながら、アクションプランを改定していかなくちゃいけないですね。そういうことを続けていくことが非常に大事で、それは能登でも伊風川でもですね、 モニタリングとエバリュエーション、それからアクションプランのアップグレードということを言ってますが、そう簡単ではないわけですね。それから、イフガオでもですね、日本と同じように、イフガオ棚田の現状評価、イフガオライステラスアセスメントということをですね、もう3年ぐらい前から始めてまして、イフガオ棚田の今現状がどうなっているかですね、例えば、棚田の面積がどれだけ減っているかとかですね、それから農民の数がどうなっているかとか、棚田で栽培されているですね、伝統の稲の品種ですね、それが今本当に使われているかどうかとかですね、それから農薬がどんどん入っていないかとかですね、そういうふうなことをですね、イフガオ棚田の現状調査をやりながらですね、アクションプランを変えていく、そういうことを今一生懸命やっています。これは棚田の状態をですね、図示したものです。いずれにしましてもですね、棚田を維持していく人材の養成ということがですね、能登でもイフガオでもですね、佐渡でも非常に大事です。それでますますですね、地域の住民、地域のいろんな関係者がですね、もっと参加してですね、それでGIAHS、それから世界遺産とかをですね、メインストリームにしていくっていうことが必要です。これは先ほど基調講演したパルビスさんがですね、パルビスさんは2011年の世界農業遺産に能登が認定された時からたびたびですね、能登に来てくれています。最近しばらくは来られてませんので、またぜひですね、パルビスさんに能登に来てもらってですね、いろんな交流してほしいと思っています。それから現在、コロナの下でですね、大変厳しい状況ですが、私たちはイフガオとですね、オンラインでつながっていてですね、佐渡も含めた3つのGIAHSが緊密に交流しています。それから、能登の小学校とイフガオの小学校、能登の中学校、高校とですね、イフガオの中学校、小学校がですね、中学校、高等学校が交流する授業も始まってですね、今度、佐渡の高校とイフガオの高校も交流することが決まっています。それからですね、若者同士の交流もですね、今、能登と佐渡、それからイフガオも含めてですね、マイスターの関係者が含めて、そういうのが始まろうとしています。それからですね、今日はGIAHSの話をしているわけですね。ここで里山というのがですね、重要なコンセプトとして利用されています。それで里山をですね、GIAHSだけじゃなしに、里山イニシアティブですね、CBD の里山イニシアティブ、それからユネスコの世界遺産もですね、里山というのは非常に重要なコンセプトなんですが、しかしそれぞれのですね、プラットフォームが縦割りになっていてですね、GIAHSのトゥイニングも私たちは能登と佐渡、それからイフガオでどんどんやってますが、まだまだそういうですね、GIAHS間の連携とかですね、プラットフォーム間の連携というのが足りないと思うんですね。だからこれをさらに強化していくということが非常に大事だと思います。それから SDGs はですね、こういうそれぞれのプラットフォームをですね、まとめていくというね、大きな役割があるんだろうと思います。日本は、人口減少と高齢化が進んでですね、そういう課題の先進国であります。ですから、それをですね、GIAHSの人材育成なんかを含めてですね、日本を活性化するということが大事です。ちょっと大急ぎになってしまいましたが、ありがとうございました。以上です。
Thank you very much, Professor Nakamura. And we indeed learned a lot from your expertise, which is ongoing, and the effort that you are doing to revitalize, especially the population of Satoyama landscape or rural communities, and the combination or diversification of agricultural livelihood and other new livelihoods that can be adopted by local communities, such as tourism. Without any more explanation, I would like to pass the floor on Professor Hayashi from Oita Prefecture, Japan, Hayashi Hiroaki Sensei is the leader of Kunisaki GIAHS. He has been working with the Oita Prefecture and the Kunisaki communities in revitalization and development of Oita GIAHS. Professor Hayashi, floor is yours.
はい。皆さん、こんにちは。それから、家族ですね。ありがとうございます。このような会議に、参加させていただいて、とても感謝申し上げます。まず、画面を共有させていただきます。見えてますでしょうか？ OK。この写真はですね、私どもの、地図なんですが、東京から西に800キロぐらい、九州っていうところがありますけれども、そこの丸い半島ですね。これが2013年に世界農業遺産に認定されています。これ海岸に山がありましてですね、海岸と山が直接つながったような、海と山が非常にリンクした、世界農業遺産になってまして、その山の中ではこの森の管理ですね、特に広葉樹の森の管理をしながら、さらにこの森を使って椎茸を作りながらですね、成立している世界農業遺産になります。今日は、この世界の農業の持続可能性、あるいは将来のそのカーボンニュートラルの社会に私たちの活動がコミットできるかどうか、そういうことについて議論をしてみたいというふうに思っています。特に世界農業遺産になったことについて大事なことは、やはり農家の人が認定されたことについて自信を持つ。さらに彼らの活動、農業生産が、その世界のそのカーボンニュートラル社会にも役立ってるんだっていうことを自覚していく。そういうことにつながるっていう話をしていきたいというふうに思っています。これ私の履歴ですけど、私はこの国東半島で1960年に生まれました。もう61歳になります。1979年から2003年までは東京大学で研究者として研究生活、特に私は、植物栄養肥料学、それから土壌学等の研究、基礎研究をやっておりました。41歳の時に、私の田舎に戻ってきまして、自分で農業をやりながら、それから林業をやりながら、椎茸を作りながら暮らしておりましたが、2012年に風武先生にお会いしまして、世界農業遺産認定制度っていうのを知ることができまして、パルビス先生等にも大変お世話になって、2013年に認定を勝ち取ることができました。その後、この運営を、アクションプランを実行しながらですね、世界農業遺産の運営に当たっております。で、私が東京から田舎に戻ってきて考えた社会的な問題ってのはいろいろあるんですけれども、先ほどから問題になってます少子高齢化の最前線にいるっていうこと。例えば学校がなくなったり、病院がなくなったり、それから公共交通がなくなったり、それから高地が放棄されてですね、農業生産がよくできなくなっていく。それから伝統的な、いろんなお祭りとかそういうものがなくなってしまって、地域社会の活性がなくなっていってしまう。それからとても綺麗な里山の風景がなくなっていってしまう。さらにはいろんな洪水が起こったり、いろんな問題が起こってくる。というようなことがあります。で、この観点というのはまさに、世界農業遺産の認定基準ということになろうかというふうに思います。非常に私、世界農業遺産の認定っていうのは、そういう意味で、今の私たちの社会的な課題を反映するものになっていると思います。さらに、ここに、6番目に書いたんですけれども、今私たちは、将来に向かってカーボンニュートラルな社会を作っていくっていうことに、行かなきゃいけないわけですけど、これについてどういうふうに私たちの世界農業遺産が関与できるかということについて今日はお話したいというふうに思っています。これ全体像ですけれども、山の中にはですね、これ広葉樹なんですけれども、クヌギっていう広葉樹です。椎茸生産に使う木ですけれども、これを切り出して、原木の干し椎茸を生産して売っていくわけですね。さらに水をですね、非常に雨が少ないところですから、水をですね、ため池に溜めて、水田農業も行われていきます。で、この水がこの干潟まで潤していくっていうような、海と、それから里とですね、山が非常にリンクしたような世界農業した。その中で水がぐるぐる、循環しているっていうような社会になっております。で、これ森ですけれども、このクルギの森、これを使って、この木を切り出して椎茸を作るわけですけれども、表面にはですね、非常に有機物が溜まってきます。 それから、これ土壌の上の方ですけど、黒いところがありますけれども、ここにも腐食っていう形でカーボンが固定されて、何千年も固定されていきます。こういうふうに、ここに水が含用されたり、それから、カーボンが固定されるっていうことが、この森を適切に管理するっていう中で行われていくわけですね。こういうことをぜひ、都会に住む人たちも知っていただいて、私たちの生産活動を支援してほしいというふうに思っているんです。今日はここの数字的なことをお話したいというふうに思っています。これは椎茸の世界、私たちの椎茸農家ですけれども、彼らの支援をしたりですね、できた生産物、これ干し椎茸ですけれども、ヨーロッパでも非常に高く売られていると思いますが、こういったもののブランド化、それから子供たちへの次世代教育等をやりながら、この私たちのGIAHSをどういうふうに発展させていくかということを、このアクションプランを実施しながらやっているわけですけれども、特にですね、この椎茸農家っていうのがカーボンニュートラル社会を作るということに貢献できるかっていうことについて、少し考えてみたいというふうに思います。これは私たちの森づくりなんですけれども、これ山の中の木を伐採するわけですけれども、でこの木を切り出して、椎茸菌を摂取して、でそれで、少し2年ほど養生しまして、それを収穫する場所に持っていくと椎茸生えてくるんですけれども、それを乾燥して市場に売っていきます。で数年間、椎茸を収穫すると、この原木はボロボロになって、土に帰っていく。一方、山の中では切った切り株からですね、これ枯れないで、切ってもですね、枯れることはありませんで、切り株からですね、芽が出てくる。これを育てていくと、また15年ほどすると、元の木に戻って、また伐採できる。非常に持続可能な森の生産と、この椎茸を、っていう、産物を生産していくっていうことが、非常によくリンクしている。そういうシステムになっています。こう見る限りは、非常に持続的なんですけれども、この過程が本当に持続可能であるかどうかということを少し検証していきました。で、これ図式したものですけれども、今のところなんですけど、伐採するとですね、株から芽が出てくる。で、15年すると大きくなっていくっていう、こういう広葉樹の森を、椎茸農家の人たちは、だいたい10ヘクタールぐらいずっと管理してるんですね。で、これいろんな基礎的なデータがありまして、これ計算するとですね、だいたい1軒の農家が、彼らが管理してる、その家族的な椎茸農家が管理している森1軒あたりですね、だいたい110トンの CO2 を毎年固定しているっていう計算になります。で、さらにここからは、毎年原木を切り出すわけですけど、これ55リューベですけれども、だいたい60トンぐらいの CO2 を放出するということになります。少なくともですね、この森っていうものを利用する過程においては、非常に椎茸農家っていう人たちは、持続可能な森作りをしている。そこから原木を切り出しているということが、計算上、知ることができます。それから、椎茸を収穫して乾燥するっていう過程なんですけれども、私たち5年間ぐらい椎茸を収穫して、乾燥して、売っていくわけですけれども、この過程では、化石燃料を使って乾燥するものですから、少し CO2 を排出します。これ乾燥機なんですけれども、通風乾燥機っていうのを使うんですけれども、今非常によく制御された乾燥機を使います。もともとは薪で温めてたんですけど、今は灯油を使いますけれども、非常に制御された形で通風乾燥っていうのをやりながら乾燥していくんですけれども、この過程で 2.5 リットルの灯油が1キロの干し椎茸を作るのに必要ということが今分かっております。そういったことを考えますと、農家1軒あたりがですね、毎年 5.8 トンの化石燃料由来の CO2 を放出しているという計算になります。で、さらに、先ほど言いましたように森の中には、椎茸を取った後の、朽ちた原木が残るわけですけれども、大体そこに 6.5 トンぐらいの CO2 が固定されています。これはもう分解されません。で、こういったことをですね、全部、見てみるとですね、平均的な家族的な椎茸農家ですね。だいたい10ヘクタールから15ヘクタールぐらいの、クヌギの広葉樹林を、持っているわけですけれども、彼らは森の中にだいたい110トンの CO2 を毎年固定していきます。で、しかし、例えば椎茸のための原木を切り出す、あるいは葉っぱとかですね、小さな幹が分解する。それから根っこっていうのがありますから、そういったものがあって、トータルとしてはプラスマイナスゼロになっているわけですね。からさらに、乾燥するときに化石燃料を使います。それからトランスポーテーションとかそういうところにも使うんですが、だいたい 5.8 トンなんですね。で、先ほど説明しましたように、収穫して残った原木に 6.5 トン。それから、一番最初にお話ししましたけれども、土壌の中に腐食としてですね、だいたい 7.8 トンの CO2 を固定する。 それからさらに最近の研究では、このクヌギの根っこっていうのは枯れませんので、だいたい 22.9 トンの CO2 を固定するというふうに考えてもいいんではないかっていうことが研究されております。私はそういうふうに言いたいというふうにしてるんですが、そういうふうに見ますと、トータルとして、椎茸農家っていうのはですね、毎年十分な量の二酸化炭素を森の中に固定しているということになります。こういうことを、私たちは農家の人たちに提案しながらですね、彼らが自信を持って広葉樹の森を伐採しながら、森を再生産しながら椎茸を作って、その干し椎茸を都市の人に売って買ってもらう。でそのことを都市の人が理解してもらう。そういうような交流が進んでもらうということが、非常に大事じゃないかなというふうに思ってまして、そのことも最近、生産農家、私も生産農家の一人ですけれども、農家自身がですね、自信を持って、その生産物を作っていくことができるようになっている。そういうことを、私たちが自覚していくことが非常に大事だなというふうに思っています。これ今、子供たちへの次世代教育なんですけれども、これ小学校4年生から6年生まで、10歳から12歳ぐらいの子供たちにですね、実際に森の中に行ってどういうふうな森を管理しているかっていうことを理解してもらう。あるいはどういうふうにして椎茸が作られているかっていうのを理解してもらう。こういうような次世代教育を、随分今力を入れて、やっているところです。非常に大きな効果があって、私たちはこの小さい世代、若い世代に非常に期待をしているところです。で、これ最後なんですけれども、こういうことをやりながら私たちは何をやりたいかっていうと、これパルビス先生の本から取らせてもらったんですけれども、こういう持続可能なシステムをですね、私たちが自信を持って続けていく。で、それを次世代にさらにいい形でバトンタッチしてですね、この子供たちがこれを継いでもらう。そういうような世界の農業者にするようなアクションプランを今実施していきたいというふうに考えています。またこのことをですね、都会の人たちに理解していただきながら、私たちが作った干し椎茸、とても美味しいものです。非常に高いですけれども、これを買っていただいてですね、私たちの世界の農業者さんと一緒にですね、持続可能な社会を作っていきたいというふうに考えています。どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you, Professor Hayashi, for your very technical information and the beautiful job that you and your ancestors have been doing, and you are trying to sustain this. This is such a beautiful industry to produce wood and then produce food out of wood. And the remaining is just 100% nutritious material that goes back to the soil and to the water irrigation system in the peninsula that is designated as World Agricultural Heritage. And this nutritious water creates the agricultural irrigation system with high quality of rice. And then at the end, it goes back to the sea with unique aquatic production that is the reason that Kunisaki Peninsula is designated as agricultural heritage for the traditional and technical system of a natural material flow. So it's very beautiful and educative site. You very well elaborated and showcased the opportunities that we can show people how we should live in harmony with nature. We can educate our children how our ancestors have been planning their environment to be able to live and to produce food without damaging the nature. And now we have this heritage. We are talking about a lot of SDGs, different areas, and I think Kunisaki Agri-Heritage is a site that those who want to visit and to learn from the nature in forms of village tourism, green tourism, heritage tourism, or ecotourism, they can learn from the society that you are representing. There is a bit of change in the program. Thank you very much. We should have 2 short videos that we are going to show it at the end of the program. So please stay with us and watch the videos at the end. And now we have a very unique and interactive session that all professors from the team will collaborate and conduct it. Actually, Professor Ota from Kyushu, Japan, has with the other professors from Taiwan, we crafted together a project that we call this Aging Farmers, Empty Villages, Lost Knowledge, Revitalizing Rural Areas in Japan and Taiwan through globally important agriculture heritage system, or GIAHS. So in this panel that we are going to discuss, we are going to see how Japan and Taiwan are learning and sharing the lessons together from agricultural heritage. At the end, we will see how we can incorporate it with tourism and how tourism can use agri-heritage as a tool of and for revitalizing local and rural communities. So I would like to invite Professor Ota to bring our colleagues for the panel discussion. Professor Ota, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for your generous introduction, Professor Kazen, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And I am Masahiko Ota from Kyushu Institute of Technology in Japan. And as Professor Kazen said, Taiwanese researchers, and I have conducted some research about GIAHS related site. And today I would like to share some of my findings, focusing on kikigaki experiences. I think you can see my slide. Yes. So kikigaki is a Japanese word. Kiki means listening and gaki means writing or documenting. So listening and documenting activity. In other words, it's a kind of oral history. And in general, young people like high school students visit directly local elderly people who are generally masters of agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, and listen to their stories and make a script, make a transcript, almost verbatim, and publish it. So in the context of GIAHS, United Nations University has been advocating this kikigaki method as a tool for sharing and recording local wisdom and connecting people, generations, and human and nature. And some Japanese GIAHS sites have applied this kikigaki method, and in particular, Kunisaki Peninsula Usa GIAHS, which Professor Hayashi has introduced, has been implementing this kikigaki activity in the last 7 or 8 years. And here is an example of document contents, sorry, all in Japanese. But this piece is about logwood cultivated shiitake mushroom, which Professor Hayashi told you, and with many pictures. And these documents are made public on the internet as PDF. You can download it. And as a researcher, why I focused on kikigaki was I think kikigaki activity can be something more than documenting local knowledge. Actually, by asking and listening other person's stories, your worldviews or perspectives to interpret things can be transformed, deepened, or transformed. So this may not be a simple quantitative increase of knowledge. Rather, that can be a quantitative formation or transformation of the worldviews. So, and that is one thing. And from the viewpoint of interviewees who are being taken interviews, in the context of local elderly people, they may also be transformed their perspectives by being asked questions and answering to them. So in summary, I wanted to explore what exactly participants on this kikigaki program are learning and what kind of benefits can Kikigake experience can bring in. So I applied just semi-structured interviews for participants of Kikigake program, both high school students and masters, elderly people, and then asked this kind of learning or change and in perspective from each component, and learning and change in perspective about agriculture, GIAHS, and their locality and existing lifestyle and their life future. And so I didn't mention here, but I did it in Kunisaki Peninsula USA GIAHS, introduced by Hayashi Sensei. And I would like to share some interesting findings. Regarding high school students, there were various kinds of learning confirmed, but in particular, I would like to introduce here discovery or different interpretation of everyday scenes of the locality. This was an interesting point because, for example, one girl, a high school student girl, said she's living in a rural area, and after this Kikigake experience, for the first time, she got aware of kind of social networks in rural areas, like people often exchange information about agriculture or climate, and exchange also products, and then that kind of her perspectives on the everyday life has been changed through this listening and documenting activities. And more generally, many students other than her said that they got aware of the great values of the Kunisaki Peninsula USA area. I don't have time, so I skip here. But it's also had the good effects on the career path. Most of the participants here will go to universities, but yes, some students said they changed their kind of which department they want to proceed, something like that. And about local elderly people, actually their worldviews were not changed as high school students, but what happened on them was reaffirmation of the principles that they have had about agricultural practices or life of themselves. So, and also they were impressed by the growing awareness among the young people about agriculture or the locality. Sorry, excuse me. So that was all for my slide. And what I wanted to say is this was not directly related to tourism issues of the SCoT, topics of the SCoT, but I wanted to confirm that this kind of social learning process can benefit the locality and local residences in GIAHS sites, and this can be applied to Taiwan. Maybe Taiwan has done similar activities in many areas, but I wanted to confirm the benefits of this kind of oral history Kikigake activities. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ota Sensei, for a very interesting research that you are doing and for your contribution. Let's invite Professor Mokahit and hear from his initiatives. Moka, floor is yours.
Thank you all for, thank you, Professor Kazem, for introducing us. And I think this is a unique chance for Taiwan to learn from GIAHS principles. That was the purpose of the project that me and Ota Sensei were conducting, and I've been learning a lot. So thank you for the speakers. So the remaining two talks will be done by me and Nien Tong, and also by Professor Liao. We will be focusing mainly on agriculture side, whereas Professor Liao will talk about Taiwan's forest conservation. So I thought we could give a brief overview of the results. We did this research in two agricultural sites, and the talk of our presentation today is Insights from Taiwan, Rural Revitalization as a Way to Combat Aging. And I would like to ask Nien Tong to take over from now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Muka. So first, I will briefly introduce like what we learned and we find in the research sites in Taiwan, and then Professor Muka will give more detail about our research ideas. So in this picture, you can see we select two potential GIAHS sites in Taiwan. One is Chishang Township, is famous for its rice industry. Another one is Manzhou Township, which is famous for its tea industry. But today we'll focus more on Chishang. So at first, we like to see whether these two sites can apply to GIAHS ideas. So based on GIAHS selection criteria, we list out all the features that can fit in. And we found that both of the sites have very spatial, their traditional agricultural system and knowledge, and also is rich of their spatial and unique landscapes. And besides these 5 criteria, we also look into different issues. And there's another thing we found, like these two places are convinced us to be a potential GIAHS site. First is the Manzhou Township is actually located in the Kenting National Park. And for the Chishang, it is selected as the Taiwan cultural landscape in 2024. So we believe like these two sites have potential to be a GIAHS site. And based on our research topic, we also dig into the aging issues and rural revitalization plans in the place to see how can they help the agricultural development. With these questions, we use the method we learned from Professor Ota, the Kikigaki method. We interview a lot of farmers in both sites, and we finally made this timeline according to the farmers' answers and sharings. So for the Chishang, we can find like in the early 19th century, in the early 19th, actually both sides, they all grow rice. But in the end, we found the rice industry disappeared in Manzhou. But in comparison, Chishang developed the rice industry very well, and we would like to know why. And based on their experience sharing, we found like in 2002, Taiwan joined WTO, and since then, the farmers feel like they are under the pressure to compete with the international free market, and thus they try to establish their local brand, like food labeling. The concept of food labeling was introduced, and also in 2010, the Rural Rejuvenation Plan in Taiwan also took Chishang as an example site. And eventually in 2014, it was selected as a Taiwan cultural landscape. The development in Chishang Township is very spatial, and we would like to learn more about this. So based on the interview, we found 3 key drivers to help Chishang develop. The first thing is in 2005, after Taiwan joined WTO, they established the Chishang rice certificate mark. The local farmers and both of the rice millers cooperate together to convince the Agricultural Association to build up the certificate system. And since then, Chishang rice became the most famous rice in Taiwan because they win several championships in the national rice competition. And the second driver is the tourism. So in 2003, Eva Airlines released a commercial videos. There was a scene that the actor, Mr. Takeshi, sitting under the tree in the field. And after the video release, this place became a very famous tourist site and attract a lot of visitors here to learn more and experience more in Chishang. And the last drivers is the art activities. So this also helped the tourism development. In 2007, they started Chishang Autumn Harvest Festival. They will introduce like artists, dance crews, and also musicians to perform in the field. This also attracts a lot of visitors and tourists. And also the young generation, they're more willing to come back to Chishang to develop the industry. So based on the interview, we found like all the farmers and residents in Chishang, they are proud of their rice culture and industry. And that's what we learned from this place. And then following, I will hand the place to Professor Muka.
Thank you, Tong. So what we have learned from Chisang is we wanted to know how can rural revitalization. So Chisang has been officially designated as a cultural landscape. People do organic farming. They engage in rice competition. So how can rural revitalization help preserve agricultural heritage? So even though a successful case study like Chisang, aging was still perceived as the biggest challenge the community is facing. So what I would like to know from the speakers is, to what extent do externally imposed classifications, for example, Taiwan cultural landscape, but also, for example, GIAHS, stimulate rural revitalization, or is it more related to bottom-up initiatives and local leaderships? And what I've learned today is that in the case studies that we talked about about Japan and GIAHS, is that it did stimulate rural revitalization. So I would be very much interested to know, like, well, did it first that the designation start and then we could see rural revitalization, or was it the other way around? So how is GIAHS implemented? Are local governments the main initiators, or do they come from bottom-up movements? And what do meta studies say on GIAHS? Can we already focus on some kind of impacts? We are currently developing a GIAHS database to see how GIAHS, for example, contributes to aging population, conservation, and so on. Next slide. So preliminary conclusions. Actually, in Chisang, local leaders were very much key in developing, or in this case, it's not GIAHS, but in this case, there was a rural revitalization. But rural revitalization seems also be a combination of finding niche markets. In this case, was organic farming in Taiwan, but also luck. What we also saw in Chisang is that social capital is essential. For example, among the community, there was this unwritten rule that farmers could not sell their land, as it must be kept in the community. So I would also like to know, for example, in Japanese case studies, is land dynamics. If we talk about de-aging a population, do you see like migrants buying up land, or how do the communities and the land dynamics function? What we also found very interesting was when we talked about organic farming and traditional farming with farmers in Chisang, they would actually refer to non-organic farming as their traditional farming methods. And they talked about organic farming as their introduced farming methods. We didn't necessarily see this as a problem, because this ties in perfectly with the so-called living agricultural heritage paradigm, that people could shift to say, well, our traditional farming methods were non-organic, but our introduced farming methods are organic, and they would link it back to their forefathers, but there was this time in between in which farmers in Taiwan were doing non-organic farming methods. And that's why what I very much liked about Kazem Sensei's, but also the other speakers, to say, well, bringing back the culture and agricultural heritage. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing more views about that. So I would like to give the floor back to Kazem Sensei. Thank you.
Thank you, Moka, very much. I'm also enjoying learning from your case studies, and we would definitely have some more activities on site when we can travel. We are not very far apart, and we will bring this community. I've seen more than 70 people sitting here, and many people in YouTube, so they will be interested in joining us. Let's move on to Professor Liao, and his presentation. Liao Sensei, please.
Okay, good afternoon. Yeah, I will share my PPT. Thank you so much. I have the chance to present talking about the Forestry Cultural Park and the heritage conservation in Taiwan. Maybe you already know that Taiwan is a small island, just like a sweet potato. However, we have many forests. The forest land maybe about occupy 60% of the total island area. So the forestry is very important industry in the past, but unfortunately in 1980, the industry was declining. Yeah, we import many lumber and some log from the foreign country, maybe from the Malaysia, Indonesia, or from Canada. So now we're thinking about how to transfer. It's a cultural term. So the Taiwan Forestry Bureau just established 4 forestry cultural parks. This park make use of the existing forest cultural space to carry out the conservation, restoration, and the reuse projects. So some local communities involved in this project. Then I hope they can use this cultural space to do some conservation or some restoration project. And we hope we can recall the memory of the past can brought to our life now. So the Taiwan Forest Research Institute just provide this park in order to serve as the multifunctional cultural place. And that this park also provides some education, some leisure, and some creative means to the local people. And it's very also important, some unique value for the ecological forest reserve and the historical buildings. In this photo, it's the location of the 4 forestry cultural parks in Taiwan. From the East Taiwan, Lintianshan, and the northeastern Taiwan, Luodong, and the western Taiwan, the Dongshi and the Alishan. Totally, now we have 4 cultural parks. First one, I will briefly introduce the Lintianshan Forestry Cultural Park in the Huarian County. This forestry was begun in 1918 during the Japanese occupation. It's almost 100 years ago. And a number of logging railways was established. So you can see the older railway. And so far, you also can see the dormitory and some buildings. Then just concentrated. And these old forestry settlements can be revitalized. So we just promote the sense of village life. So so far, many people are coming to the Lintianshan. It's a good place for the environmental education, and the elementary school student can learn the history about the forest industry. And in 2006, this park is listed as the historical village. This one is the first one in Huarian County. The second is the Luodong Forestry Cultural Park. It's located in my hometown, in the northeastern Taiwan. The forestry industry began in 1905. It's a long time ago. In order to harvest the native cypress forest, including the hinoki and the maniki, it's a high quality lumber. And in 1994, this area is a special forestry industrial cultural site. It's also very important for the Luodong city. So now this one is already becoming beautiful park, and the local people enjoy this area. And in 2012, this site was listed as the cultural landscape area. And in this park, you can see the older storage pool, just like this one. And you can see the train. This one is for the log transportation, and some steam engine. The third one is the Dongshi, located in the Taichung city. This forestry cultural park is different from the Lintianshan and the Luodong cultural park, because this park is the first Taiwanese site to introduce the American style. We get some funding from the American government, and we establish this forest. And this logging, you can see some the logging operation and some factory process established in 1956. And so far, This site is closed and transported to be the cultural park. And you can understand the history about the wood industry. And you can see some the lumber works and the general office and the wooden dormitory. The dormitory is very beautiful. And some elementary school and high school are going there just to enjoy the different culture. Maybe this forestry industry closed in 1974, but the dormitory so far it's well, so it's good for the environmental education. And in 2004, the government of Taichung City has a plan to create the Dongshi Forestry Cultural Park. Yeah, last one I will introduce the Alishan. Yeah, this one is the most beautiful cultural park in Taiwan. The Alishan forest industry began in 1899, during the Japanese occupation time. So yeah, it's about 120 years ago. And in the Alishan, there are the high quality conifer, Hinoki, Meniki. So in 1906, it was the first station to establish the Alishan Forest Railway. It's very famous in the world because the mountain is very steep. So this railway is so steep, and it's not easy to keep the transportation. So if you cutting the log from the Alishan, you must slowly transport to the GIAHS city in the plain area. So the GIAHS lumber has a bigger plant for the sawmill. And in 1998, there are official registered as the GIAHS historical sites. So totally in Taiwan, we have 4 cultural parks. So I invite you, if you have opportunity to visit Taiwan, maybe you can travel to the 4 cultural park. It's very different. Yeah, it's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I personally am one of the most eager customers for your cultural parks and interested to see how the local community are involved and how they benefit from the cultural park and how they're different or similar with national parks. We have so many of national parks in Japan that mainly are forest. And the concept of cultural park is more associated with the social capital, which is very interesting. Thank you very much. We have one more main speaker, Professor Lee, and we are going to listen to you and hear from your expertise before we go for the discussion. Professor Lee, floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Hi, I'm Lee Shan-Hong from National Taiwan Normal University. Sorry, I did not prepare any PowerPoint slides, but I would like to share some of my thoughts after listening to those wonderful presentations. In Taiwan, we are facing one of the issues on how to balance between agriculture and climate change. So climate change has many of the negative impacts on Taiwan, especially in agriculture, including like bringing extremely high temperature or extremely low temperature. So fishes will die during the cold weather event, and the hot temperature is harmful for agricultural farming. So those are some of the issues brought by climate change. In addition, like one of the talks is talking about the net zero society, and many of the farms in Taiwan are transforming into solar panel farms because the farmers got much higher pay. when comparing to farming. So the case of shiitake industry just presented in the case is a wonderful example how we can keep agriculture industry and also contribute to the net zero society. I think that will be a very wonderful case for Taiwan to learn. So in addition, other things that climate change will bring is the natural hazards, like the floods and heavy typhoons, etc. So those are threats from climate change that will have impact, negative, especially negative impacts on agriculture. I'm wondering about how to balance or how the issue of climate change will influence the agricultural systems around the world. So those are some of my feedbacks and thoughts about the talks today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Lee, and thank you all. It was a beautiful symphony of different ideas on one topic. So I think what we share all is the community in the center. So the communities who have been living in harmony with nature. And as the concept of GIAHS mentioned, this is the story of co-adaptation of human and nature. And what we have is a proof of sustainability, the sustainable livelihoods based on agriculture. But as you all know, the livelihood has changed, and today's traditional farmers are not able to keep and to conserve or continue their traditional landscape. It doesn't matter if they are in industrialized or developing countries. If they are in developed countries like Japan, for example, we have depopulation and aging society. People do not want to farm. We have more younger generations in the Philippines, for example, in Ifugao rice terraces, that I see many young people, but they are not interested in farming too. So this is a general situation that keeping traditional agricultural landscape based on agricultural product or food production itself, it seems or looks impossible. So I want to pass the floor to all of you to start the dialogue and the questions that it might have raised in your mind. But before that, let's have a question, or let's hear from Professor Jafari about what you want specifically to ask in the anthropology point of view or tourism industry point of view, Jafar. So agricultural heritage, as you know, or through this presentation, is not exactly similar as UNESCO heritage program. So what can agriculture heritage or should do to revitalize communities, and what tourism can do for agri-heritage conservation? Professor Jafari.
What tourism cannot do for agriculture tourism. Yes, thank you very much. This was a wonderful webinar session, workshop, whatever we may call it. As a cultural anthropologist, we all talk the same language. I am a cultural anthropologist. You may not think you are, but there's a little anthropologist living in you, because I could hear you as an anthropologist, very sensitive to issues, local issues, and the like. Of course, in this webinar, we are talking about agritourism. We are bringing agriculture, farm tourism together. These are not new concepts in tourism, actually. In the earlier days, we used the term farm tourism, and farm tourism was spread throughout 20th century. And later on, we in tourism create terminologies, and this way we create products, new products. So agritourism was created the same way that we combined ecology and tourism and became a version called ecotourism. So these are some of the innovative ideas in tourism. So farm tourism has been here for decades, and it's universally practiced. It's not native to only some countries, but it's universal, and it has really evolved. When you think about it, we even had the simple concept of in rural areas, in the sense of the resources that we could then use, we would bring it to tourism, and that gave to bed and breakfast idea in the old days, that you could have them in small cities and in large cities. And that bed and breakfast concept has now graduated to Airbnb in rural as well as a large community. Basically, it means the resources that were popular before, they are going out of fashion or popularity, and how tourism can bring them, blow life into them. Back to rural tourism, I heard a lot that I really appreciate, and we should consider when thinking, get the concepts of rural tourism and rural and tourism together. The first thing I could hear all of you saying without saying it is we are talking about small communities, and a small means simplicity. And therefore, a lot of factors we have to be considered, and you were considering in your presentation, that local cultures are very simple. They are not sophisticated. They are not urban cultures. They are very simple, and they have been like that for generations. That is very important. The one thing that we often forget when we impose tourism on rural communities in agritourism is that we have to ask ourselves if where tourism we are taking tourism, is that to an open society or closed society? Some communities are closed communities. They have been closed for generations after generations, and suddenly imposing tourism or telling them that tourism is salvation for you, revitalization for you, it wouldn't work. So it has to, if the society, the community is closed, we have to rethink about application of tourism in these areas. And this is something we have learned in anthropology and in every field. You know, a number of your geographers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Simple cultures stick to their own culture. They are not really interested to change. And tourism is all about change. So we are bringing a change factor and the continuity factor together. And, you know, sometimes that it causes clash. But what unifies all this simple, this communities is the simplicity that they have, as was mentioned, as we noticed in many presentations. And the parts that in tourism has value is that these local communities have their own dishes and their own food and their own cuisine. And that speaks to what Pervez was talking about, that local agriculture and using local product. The tourists value actually that. And sometimes we miscommunicate to the tourism destinations that you have to do things differently. Tourists are different. No, tourists want simplicity. It reminds me, I did a conference in Iran myself, and well, there's a city in Iran called Isfahan, and it's the center of tourism in Iran. And we thought that our speakers would be very attracted to what Isfahan was offering. At the end of the conference, we took them to a small village outside of the city, and that was the highlight for our participants. The simplicity, the dishes, the local food, the custom, the tradition, everything. So yes, these small communities have a lot to offer, but we in tourism end up taking advantage of them, and they're so simple and they don't realize that. In small communities, there's something else which is very important and it becomes endangered, and that is hospitality. They're very good in hospitality. Well, it's not that urban people don't have hospitality, they do, but they have commercialized their hospitality. There's a difference between commercialized hospitality and the authentic hospitality which is offered by in the simple rural agritourism destinations. I don't want to say so much because I learned a lot and I was adjusting my notes as you were talking. In summary, I want to say that if you are not in tourism, let me assure you that there's a rich literature in tourism. Just to quantify the richness, I'm trying to combine quality and quantity. Just to quantify the richness, we have 400 journals in tourism. How many fields can you think of 400 academic research-based journals? That is the body of knowledge we are talking about. It's amazing what tourism studies has become and the knowledge which is unfortunately locked in the libraries and books, and we don't learn from them. One thing that we have also learned that tourism is not for everybody. It's not the salvation for every destination. So it's important not to take it as a medicine. It works in another place. It's going to work on you too. No, this is a different body and it takes a different medicine, and tourism may not go. So tourism is not answer to problems for all communities. Tourism in the case of agritourism has to adapt to the local, not the local adapting to the global. So we have this issue of globalization, and globalization is more present in larger communities, in mega destinations, etc. But in small communities, localization is more important, because if we lose that, then we have lost the attractiveness of the destination. Something that I would like to make here, we talk about climate change, etc. If a lake is polluted, it's not gone forever. It is possible to bring it back. We are able to re-ecologize the lake. But if a culture goes, it has gone, you cannot bring it back. So culture is extremely sensitive, more sensitive than climate and environment. So we have to really be careful with when we are talking about agritourism, farm tourism, with a simple value, a simple sense. In local communities, sense of ownership is extremely important. If you do not give them the sense of ownership, that this is their tourism, this is their tourism product, and their tourism product is different from other tourism products. They have to feel it. They have to be in it, and they have to be with it. Something which is often neglected in small communities, but it's better than in larger communities, is training and retraining the population in the sense of tourism. Little training goes into attracting tourists, receiving tourists, accommodating tourists, serving tourists. That has to be taught. But when we enter a destination and think with them and act with them to do tourism, we need to have training. Ladies and gentlemen, local people do not know what tourism is. So when we are giving them tourism as a medicine, as a tool for revitalization, do they know what tourism is? Not you know what tourism is, but do they know what tourism is? It reminds me of a movie that I saw many, many years ago, a cinema film that it was a stage in apparently in Tunisia. And the Germans went there and they brought their version of tourism in a small community that has seen very little of modernization. And they built a beautiful resort. And it was a successful tourism industry, but the community died and disappeared. I mean, it just killed the community. It brought business, but killed the community. This is not the idea of agritourism. This is not the idea of heritage tourism, etc. So this is very important, and training is not often changed. And ladies and gentlemen, something else that has happened during two coronavirus. Yes, we had some S's in tourism which were popular before the coronavirus, and that was sand, sea, and so on and so forth, and skies and so on and so forth. But those S's have changed, but still we have brand new S's that are going to be important in hospitality and tourism post-pandemic. Recognizing once again that tourism is service, safety is going to be extremely important, sanitation is going to be super important in not the sanitation that is in the mind of local people, the sanitation which is in the mind of tourists. What the local people think is clean and sanitized is not to the tourist. So that's where, again, the education comes. So sanitation, and we also need to teach in local communities the art of sympathy, sympathizing with the tourist, understanding the tourist. Sympathy in the sense of empathy, I mean. Empathize with the tourist, and the tourists need to empathize with their local people. And the people who work in the service industry, in the tourism industry, in the hospitality industry, they must be the most empathizing individuals, because they have to deal with the local people, empathize with local people, and the tourists. So they're caught in on this cultural bridge. And all of that connects to small communities. And let me all remind you that in 1970s, small is beautiful was promoted. You may remember the book of Schumacher, 1973 or something like Small is Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, still today, small is beautiful. Let's not make the mistakes of mega tourism, over tourism of the past. And when I say over tourism, I do not mean millions of tourists. For Venice, yes, millions of tourists. For Barcelona, yes, millions of tourists. For Dubrovnik, millions of tourists. I agree with that. But what is over tourism in a village is 200 people. More than that is over tourism. So we should not be thinking tourism, oh, in small communities, we have a small number of tourists. That's okay. No, it's not. It's over capacity. So what is the receptiveness of how much of tourism is too much for the local community? So we have learned a lot from the past, and I hope we learn some of these lessons of the past. We don't repeat the mistakes of the past. I think for those of us who prescribe tourism to rural communities that are losing agriculture, and therefore let's bring tourism to complement the dying agriculture, we have to be very careful about that. And we have to do things somehow differently.
Thank you.
I could go on and on, because your session is my session in the sense that I can relate to all the things you said. We talk exactly the same language, but you thought you were talking from your geography, economic development, sociology point of view. But to me, you were also talking about from tourism point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jafar, for your great conclusion remarks. We have a number of questions that I would like ask Mocha to direct it to the floor. Mocha, since the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kazem Sensei. So just to look at the chat about questions that are being asked. One question is how to motivate you to cooperate with elders, especially in rural environment in Kikigaki project. These days, young prefer to abandon past generation skills and tradition, seeking for newer modern skills and occupation. So what's the glue between the generation? Maybe Ota Sensei, would you like to briefly reflect on this question?
Yes, actually, I have replied to this person personally on chat. But first of all, I think at least in Kunisaki Peninsula GIAHS, this kikigaki activity is not a mandate. This is a voluntary activity for small number of persons. And then, so such kind of students are, in the first place, highly motivated, and that's good. And at the same time, I think Hayashi Sensei is a better person to answer, but I understand for primary schools and the junior high schools, I think Hayashi Sensei has given lectures or some kind of on-site activities about shiitake mushrooms, something like that. So I think all children in Kunisaki Peninsula have got some kind of educational activities about GIAHS. I understand. So so that is a very brief my answer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we really like the idea of kikigaki. So actually, when we did the research in Taiwan, actually some of the students that participated in the research are actually watching the seminar right now. So hello, Angelina, if you are listening.
Excuse me,
so maybe
Professor Hayashi?
Professor Hayashi, would you like to reflect more?
Yeah.
若い世代とそれから古い世代がどうコミュニケーションするかっていうのはとても大事です。で、とにかく初対面でそういうことはできないわけですけれども、何回も会いながら、なんでその彼らが長い期間ですね、そこで農業を続けてきてるのか、そのモチベーションは何なのかっていうことに若い人たちは興味があります。どうしてこんな田舎でですね、そんなにお金も儲からない仕事っていうのを続けてこれたのか。そういうところに非常に興味を示すわけですね。で、これはやはりこれから、いろんな生き方あると思いますけれども、若い人たちもちろんコンピューターとかですね、AI とか、そういう興味あるわけですけど、またもう一つの生き方としてですね、持続可能性っていうことに、若い人たちも興味を持っているというふうに今感じています。
Thank you very much, Professor. So just to go to the chat again, because there are many questions asked. One question comes from Professor Joyce here. Good to hear from different case studies. I'd like to raise some issues. First question is whose heritage we are talking about. And also when we talk about agricultural heritage in the context of Taiwan, it seems the indigenous traditional way of farming isn't mentioned here. Their relations with the land, environment, and ecosystems need to be paid attention. Well, because it's about Taiwan, I very much agree with Professor Joyce that obviously the indigenous heritage of farming system, relationships with land definitely need to be acknowledged and also more researched about. And I know Professor Joyce actually is doing research about food systems. So. But maybe in general question to the audience, to everyone, and like if we talk about heritage, what heritage are we specifically talking about? Perhaps Professor Parviz could briefly reflect upon that.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you everybody. I listened carefully and enjoyed a lot about the discussions, particularly on the tourism. But going back to agricultural heritage, I really want to emphasize that tourist, of course, is a part of it. But the big question when we asked ourselves in early 2000 was what is good for humanity? Small farmers, family farming, smallholders, or industrial sort of agriculture, which is dominating in the world. Now there are a little bit of variation even in industrial agriculture, but nevertheless, the issue was what side we should really sort of support. And as I said, originally we were talking about multifunctional agriculture, an agriculture which not only produce food, but also many other goods and services, including not only for local communities, but also for national and global communities. So, of course, we have a huge food problem. and I said food and nutrition problem. And the heritage which we have learned and brought by our ancestors on food and on agriculture, there are multiple dimensions, whether it is biodiversity, whether it is landscape, whether it is the quality of food, diversity of food, as I mentioned, but not only food, but also in medicinal areas, etc. There are a lot of things that smallholders and family farmers and agricultural heritage in general offers to humanity, which we have been actually either desiccating them or forgotten many of them. So we need to really think about how we can, especially in the era of climate change, how are we going to deal with all these problems associated, for example, with industrial agriculture. The emissions are enormous, and we know if we want to do something about climate change, we should also tackle the issues related to emissions by agriculture sector, industrial agriculture sector. But as I said, there is also health issues related to production and mass production, etc. But one thing I would like to particularly emphasize. I noted some of the discussions, and particularly Professor Jafari, whom I learned a lot, and I appreciate very much your discussions, but also other colleagues from Taiwan and others. First of all, what we need to bring in agricultural heritage back is the self-confidence and sort of essentially making those people proud of what they have conserved over thousands of years. Not only diversity of the plants and animals and knowledge, etc., but also they survived in so many different eras and problems associated. So this resilience by itself is a fantastic asset that the small farmers and family farming are still, because they are feeding 70% of the humanity. Most of Africans feed at least themselves. If they did not produce this small farming products, I mean, it would be a disaster for entire planet. So that's one thing is important. And the other issue is that, yes, tourism is one of the very important sectors, I mean, for all humanity. But the problem is that many of agriculture heritage actually were affected negatively by tourists, because most of the problems with tourists is often tourist is run by cities and people are in the cities. Essentially the sort of private sector, the industrial sector that they want to really make the tourist as an industry. And that has been not necessarily very good for agricultural heritage. I remember when I was a kid in my country, we were doing tourism. We were going and staying in a farmer's place. We learned about their animals. We looked at we drank their milk. Actually, I learned about caviar in Persian Gulf. In northern Iran, Caspian, by eating the food that they were serving themselves. I mean, it was really something. It goes back at least 50, 60 years ago. So these are the kind of things that those people had. And then, of course, business and industry used it. And of course, they multiplied. But then those people on the ground remained poor and remained neglected. So it is very important. How can we really bring them some additional value if we are promoting tourism in agricultural heritage systems, because obviously we need to be very careful and keep the balance. I was talking about labeling food that we are working with World Heritage, World Agricultural Heritage Foundation, working in, for example, Shungming Island, in Shanghai, in Tunisia, working even in Philippines, where we were talking about. It is also important to have tourist labeling. I know there is some initiative on that, what is sustainable tourism, what is agrotourism, etc. But really sort of bringing some kind of label that the people who really care about agrotourism or people on the ground, they really somehow select the places that they want to go. Of course, not because of the beauty, everything, but for example, food heritage, as I mentioned, it's so important. And there are places which, of course, offer not only tourism as a landscape tourism, but also the food, as was mentioned by Professor Jafari. So another important thing about agricultural heritage is we mentioned, how are we going to bring the young generation back to these neglected or abandoned small farming communities? This is a big problem everywhere. Japan and China, of course, also, but Japan or other industrial country, but also in Europe, we have problems in Italy. In the southern Italy, they sell actually farms for €1 because they want young people to go back and invest on those farms or those houses that they are in rural areas. So it is important to have policies that bring young generation back. The most important thing is connecting the young generation with the local communities. And that's why this application, what I was talking about, Ag Legacy, which you can find it in our website, sort of description and how we tested in both Philippines and Tunisia, is essentially the farmers. Of course, most of the farmers these days have a smartphone, and with their smartphone, they connect to a platform. They connect with each other. They talk about what they have. They take a picture. They take a little short videos, and also explain their knowledge. Of course, there was this was discussion about how the local people can talk about their history or their ideas, but this can be also shared on a platform like Facebook, which we call it crowdsourcing. Essentially, the information is coming from the crowd to a community or to a platform which is used, but not only for explaining, not only for saying what they have, but also to connect in order to sell, to buy, to exchange. So it is very, very important. Then another very important subject area that I would like to discuss, we need to really see what is the purpose of agricultural heritage system. I have explained in many, many books and sort of publication that I have done. Agricultural heritage, we are essentially saying to the world, especially industrial agriculture, that there are a lot that we have been neglecting in modernizing our agriculture. Not only biodiversity, organic, all kind of things that we have in a small farm, in addition to knowledge, in addition to culture, in addition to many, many interesting things that people, but also giving these people the pride of what they have built, what they have maintained so far. And this recognition, as I said it in my PowerPoint, is one of the most important area of work of agricultural heritage. Not only that, but also in agricultural heritage, each agricultural heritage has an action plan, dynamic conservation action plan. This means that we want to see how we can go for the future, into the future, to use this system to revitalize younger generation, to bring back some of the migrant, bring back some of the people who would like really, for example, I remember in Tunisia, there are a lot of migrant Tunisians in France. When they go back to their village, they built essentially huge building, which has nothing to do with environment of that village. They make big swimming pools using the water which which is water for at least 100 farmers using that water for their swimming pool. So there is really a big contradiction between, even in China. I've seen many villages in China, when the Chinese sort of migrant come back to their village, instead of doing something for maintaining and sustaining their village, they are really putting a lot of new things, which makes everything in disorder. While, for example, in Japan, I have seen GIAHS Cafe. So the community, when they were getting together and deciding about their community, they now created a coffee shop, which is called GIAHS Cafe. So it is very interesting to see how what they had as a tradition, they brought it back in a more sort of modern way, or GIAHS bar, or GIAHS essentially it's a restaurant, using the local food for feeding people, and of course attracting tourism, which is a different tourism, including myself when I was traveling there. So I don't want to sort of dominate the discussion. There are a lot of issues to be raised related to agricultural heritage, and we are specifically talking about sort of tourists in today. But honestly speaking, of course, I have seen very good tourism in very good GIAHS areas, but I have seen more bad tourism in GIAHS areas. And the damage that some of these, for example, in China, there was huge amount of money giving to tourist sector industry to develop GIAHS tourism. But this industry didn't know anything about criteria of GIAHS, why we are talking about GIAHS. They only looked at the landscape. Oh, wonderful, let's build a big hotel. They even brought flowers from Netherlands, planting in rural areas, or trees which were coming from Europe. I mean, this has, I mean, for me, it was sort of shocking to see why we are talking about agricultural heritage. We are bringing such a completely strange things and putting in a agricultural heritage site. So it's really very, very important. And that's why we really need action plan. We need a committee to really follow and sort of essentially monitor a GIAHS system. Unfortunately, FAO, just like UNESCO, have been essentially labeling agricultural heritage, but they have not been really following very well the way they should be followed, these systems. They need to be invested on, the government, the local communities, but also international community. In many projects in GIAHS in the old days, we had money brought to these places to really maintain what they had and bring back culture in agriculture, as I said. But also one thing is very important. This is my last word, twinning different GIAHS, different NIAS, nationally important agriculture, bringing them together to learn from each other, bringing them together to cooperate with each other, to even exchange tourism in between themselves. So these are some of the very, very important issues which has not been really put on the table. And I hope that this community that we are facing now, talking to, I hope we could do something more interesting and more concrete in the future. Thank you,
Jafar. Thank you so much. I think you and your colleagues in agriculture are talking the same with my colleagues in tourism and anthropology and sociology. I think this is authenticity. We are thinking of the authentic destination, and you are talking about the authentic agricultural heritage system and authentic place. So we talk about cultural and ethnic conservation. You're talking about the genetic side of, and that's yeah, exactly. You're talking the same language. So we would love to continue this webinar, but we have about 10 minutes left that we have our translation system. Actually, it is already 20 minutes past, and they're kindly still doing the job. I would like to pass the floor again to Mocha to hear something about Taiwan. I would love to hear from that cultural parks. Yes, Mocha.
Yeah. So may I ask Professor Liao to talk? So it seems the cultural parks is something very special for Taiwan. So could you maybe reflect a little bit on what other parts, for example, in Japan or other parts of the world, could learn from Taiwan's cultural parks?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, now the cultural park becoming an important construction in Taiwan government, because we need the education, we need the recreation, and we need the tourism. So now the cultural park is also very popular. So you can see some elementary school or high school students just learning the history in the cultural park. On the other hand, the cultural park is also for the cultural conservation. Yeah, especially focus on the forest industry, because now this industry was declining. Many companies already moved to the southeastern. So now in the past, this industry is important, but now it becoming the recreational site. Yeah, maybe if you have time, you can visit our cultural park. It's very interesting and beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Liao. So I see there's a question in the chat from Professor Lawal Marafa. Professor Lawal Marafa is my PhD supervisor. So, and Professor Marafa asked, this is very interesting and inspiring to Professor Jafari, as cultural tourism is very important as we move into post-COVID. How can we inspire the youth and policymakers to focus on culture as an alternative to popular mass tourism? And maybe due to time constraint, may I ask Professor Jafari to answer this question in 1 or 2 minutes? Thank you.
As I said, tourism is not for everyone. And I do want to emphasize that. But if tourism is for certain communities, we have to make sure they understand what it is. Their values, their culture, their cuisine, their dresses, their music, everything is theirs. And tourism is the one that would make changes in them. Therefore, I stay with my answer that tourism is not for everyone, and tourism has to be adapted to the local community rather than local community adapted to tourism. As to the young, yes, tourism, if introduced in sites that are becoming less popular because of changes in agriculture, farming, etc., tourism would make it attractive for them. But at the same time, I want to emphasize we should not be always thinking about the youth, but also the older generation. The older generation are the one that can present the culture that the tourists are looking for, the dishes, the dances, the music. I saw that in South Africa, that older people, retired people, were brought together every day in a place. They were producing their handicraft, their paintings, their weaving, their metal work, right in front of the eyes of the tourists in the local way, and they would actually sell it to the tourists. So they were involved in both the youth and the older generation in the local tourism of the area.
Thank you so much, Professor Jafari, for answering the question. So Professor Joyce says cultural parks in Taiwan are educational site and an open and living museum. So I think I would like to give the floor back maybe to Professor Kazem, and maybe conclude today's. I think the webinar was great. So I hope there can be a part 2 or a part 3, but it seems we have so much more to discuss. But please, Kazem Sensei, I would like to give the last word to you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm learning a lot today, and I think I have to reconsider my knowledge of GIAHS and study more and more. So maybe we need to continue, as you mentioned, a series of webinar on agricultural heritage, on how we can combine agri-heritage and cultural heritage, the collaborations of UNESCO and the FAO. So we have, I think, two great representatives of both sides. We have Professor Parviz and Professor Jafari, and today was Parviz's birthday. So let's engage cultural heritage and agri-heritage and let them marry again and see what are their children's. And we have to.
Excuse me, if I just may add a point here, we never mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Most of the things we talked about today, they sync with Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So I think, yeah, there was a harmony with the United Nations and the discussion we had today.
Exactly. So maybe SDGs, GIAHS, and cultural heritage. I see Professor Cooper also had one point in the chat. So Malcolm, do you want to add something in 1 minute, please? You're muted, Malcolm.
My question was quite direct. I was wondering whether the panel might comment on one way to attract people to meld culture and modern life by persuading some chefs to come and live in the rural area and use those resources, which would bridge the gap. So that was a little bit unformed, that question, but I thought it was interesting that everybody's talking about youth changing, coming back because of GIAHS. And one of the reasons they might do that is simply to create their own restaurant in the local area.
I have a great news for you, Malcolm. Both places that Professor Hayashi and Professor Nakamura are living there, we have a medicinal plant and edible plant. In Kunisaki GIAHS, they have discovered about 200 species of edible plants, out of which they have about 50 of them delicious and edible. And we found only 10 or sometimes 15 of them available in the supermarkets. So the effort of local community resulted in a restaurant. It is called Tomiku Chaya. You can, because I know it's near you, you can go and enjoy a local dish that has no meat, and it has edible plants that you haven't probably, you might walk on them, but you didn't know that you can eat them. And they have medicinal, of course, and health effect. Thank you very much for your question.
I would certainly like, one of the points, I'd certainly like Professor Parviz to come back. He's a fantastic cook. He can show the local area about that.
Exactly. So I think then this is the result of the marriage of GIAHS and cultural heritage, and food is a good attractive element. I want to ask everybody to look at the chat. We have a library of videos, our video library of SCoT, that is the result of about 50 webinars. You might like to introduce them to or use them in your classes as a university teacher, or if you're a graduate student, you want to use as a case study. So please feel free to subscribe SCoT YouTube channel and use the videos freely. And please follow the website for the upcoming webinars. We have another webinar tomorrow that is about one of the best tourism villages that is selected in 2000 or recognized in 2021 by UNWTO from Indonesia. It's very interesting that it's somehow similar with this language. With this webinar, the language is Bahasa and English both, and we have simultaneous translation and probably translation to Japanese as well. So I would like to specially thank our translation team, our translator, Mr. Andy, who voluntarily increased his effort for 30 minutes to accommodate this webinar. Thank you, Andy, and thank all of you. It was a wonderful webinar. As I promised, we have 2 videos. Those who are interested, please stay with us, and I'm going to show the videos and we watch together. Once again, thank you so much for your support, for your active participation, and for your enthusiasm in this good conversation. I would like to ask Professor Nakamura also for final greeting. Nakamura-sensei, you were very quiet. I know it's very late in your local time too, so you're still in your office.
Yeah, thank you very much tonight. I have learned a lot.
Thank you, Nakamura-sensei, and we
thank you very much,
like
Kazem,
Thank you.
Parvis, and Jafar-san. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the audience. Please continue sending your questions to SCoT info, and we will try to reply to your questions as much as we can. So I'm going to share the first video. Just a moment. This was Shizuoka, Japan, where they have Chagusaba GIAHS system. And I'm going to show the second video. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you who stayed that long with us. The second site was Aso Kumamoto, that they are doing pastoral farming on the volcanic mountain of Mount Aso. And they practice very traditionally with high technique of slash and burn. Burning the grass is a technique, and it's really a very technical job to control the fire and environment and keep the pastoral land under managed. Thank you very much. I would like to invite you all to stay in touch, and we will definitely come back with all distinguished keynote speakers and panelists again for more focused GIS webinar studies. Thank you so much. See you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.